It's not just a game, it's not just a grass. Lawn Solutions Australia is the exclusive home of Australia's best sports turf varieties. For the world's best grasses like Tiff Tough Hybrid Bermuda and Sir Grange Zoysia, contact Lawn Solutions Australia at lawnsolutionsaustralia.com.au. Hello and welcome to episode 77 of The Thing About Golf, Golf Australia magazine's never-ending attempt to answer the question, just what is it about this crazy game? Rod Morri's my name, and this episode is one that was both difficult and joyful to record. 2022 was just 9 days old when the Australian golf family lost one of its favourite sons, 1982 Australian Open winner Bob Shearer, dying suddenly at home in Melbourne. Just 96 days later, there was more sadness with news that Jack Newton, the 1979 Australian Open winner and another of the nation's golfing icons, had also passed after a 2-year battle with Alzheimer's disease. Jack and Bob were not only among this country's most successful and popular golfers, with victories both at home and abroad, they were also good mates. It was Jack's wife Jackie that introduced Bob and Kathie all those years ago, and across continents and decades, their friendship has remained strong. And today, we get to hear them reminisce about what life in golf was like, living with two genuine legends of the game. Kathie's been on the podcast before, of course, featuring alongside Bob, when I was lucky enough to chat with both for the second ever episode of the show. As Kathie reveals in this episode, it was Bob's last formal media interview, and I highly recommend going back and giving it a listen. Jackie I'd never met before, but what a delight it was to hear her tell the story of life with Jack, both before and after the 1983 accident which almost ended his life. Kathie has long been one of my favourite people in golf, and Jackie has now been added to that list. I hope that you enjoyed this discussion with the two of them as much as I did. Well, it's called The Thing About Golf, the podcast, but I think this episode perhaps we should call The Thing About Golfers. We've got two very special guests with us today, neither of whom are known for their golf ability, but both of whom are a part of the Australian golf family. Kathie Shearer, your second appearance. We had you and Bob on the show 2 years ago now. I think you were episode 2. Good of you to come back.
Thank you very much. I know Bob enjoyed doing it, and that was actually the last sort of interview that he did. Yes, he did, yeah.
And it was a fabulous one, I must say. I really enjoyed it, and I think a lot of the listeners did too. So we're looking forward to hearing from you again as well. And our other very special guest, Jackie Newton, wife of Jack Newton, who sadly, we lost Bob in January and we lost Jack in April, which I think the entire Australian golf family has felt. So fabulous to have you along as well, Jackie, and thanks for taking some time.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
I suspect the two of us might struggle to get a word in, Jackie, so we might start with you just to make sure.
Possibly.
When we had Bob and Kathie on the show, Kathie laid the blame squarely at your feet for being married to Bob. Was she telling the truth about that?
So I worked for Rothmans and all the sporting events.
This was in England, wasn't it?
In England, full time. And so I did golf and motor racing, everything. And so because I worked full time with them, I could pick where I went. And by then I'd met Jack. And so Kathie I met when I was modelling in London. And I actually got her into the promotion work, so that was how it started.
And you invited her to your party, you introduced her to Bob, and
so
as Kath put it, and here we are.
And then that's right. And then we were there, and of course they were playing in the Summery, probably.
Summery Four Ball.
Yeah, and Jack said, "Oh, well, I'll get some of the boys to come along, and we'll have a bit of party for you for your birthday," which we did. And Bob was on his own, and actually it was Jack that basically introduced them, I think.
So you're shuffling the blame along?
Yeah, I shuffled away, nice. And as much as I knew Bob, and he introduced them, and that was it. So then I started seeing Bob at all the golf events, you know.
Yeah, indeed. How did you and Jack meet? You said you already knew Jack at that point.
I did. I met Jack when I think it was his second year. He came over the year before, but this was his first top year.
So what year are we talking?
72.
Okay.
And I was up at a golf tournament called the Piccadilly Medal. There were two big tournaments. Piccadilly section did Piccadilly World Match Play. Mm-hmm. It was held at Wentworth, and the Piccadilly Medal.
Where was the medal?
The medal was up in, and I've been trying trying my hardest. I know it was a good, to find out where it was, but it was up near Blackpool.
Okay,
so it was in that area on the coast. It was a coastal. No, I don't think it was Lytham.
Okay.
I think it'd be anyway. And I'd actually seen Jack, unbeknownst to me. This was later on. I'm sure I saw him in the car park at the golf, earlier. But when I saw him walking into the golf court, the car park, he had purple socks on. His trousers were short around his ankles, and he had this blonde locks of curly hair. And, unusual, for the golfer. And anyway, that night, myself and another two of the girls were working with me at a dinner at one of the big hotels in Blackpool. And when we came out of the dinner, suddenly one of the girls, Sally Raymond, she said to me, "Oh, this guy called Tertius, one of the golfers, Tertius Claessens, he was South African. He's asked me out for a drink tonight." And anyway, we go outside, and I said, "Well, I'll see you later." But then all of a sudden, there's these two other boys there with them. And lo and behold, to us, Tertius, who couldn't speak, he was sort of more Afrikaan type, with the lingo was harder to understand. He said, "You boys come with me because at least you'll be able to understand. You can tell them if you don't." Sally doesn't understand what I'm talking about. And so anyway, unbeknownst to us, and I haven't sort of made this,
revelation.
I haven't told this to many people. I hear later that, of course, Tertius was going to see Sally, and there was another girl they called Patsy Bass Walker and myself. And the two boys, one was sorry,
doesn't matter.
Forgotten the name. And one was
Jack Tertius.
Jack Tertius and another South African boy.
Not Simon Hobday.
No, not Simon. Another boy.
You wouldn't forget Simon Hobday. I think from everything I've heard.
Simon's actually my daughter's now godfather.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah. Well, he was. He passed away. But and they tossed. But they were both going for the other girl, Patsy Bass Walker. They both fancied her on sight. And I was the boogie prize. And Jack ended up with the boogie prize. So that's how I met him.
When did you find that out, Jackie? What was that conversation like?
Later on, we were having a laugh, and he said, "Oh, you wouldn't believe, Oh, really? Mm.
Jack could get away with admitting.
Yeah, he could.
There was a touch of the Shane Warne about Jack.
Yeah,
I was just thinking when you were describing his dress and the way he would strut around the place, there were shades of Shane Warne about the early Jack, wasn't there?
He was, and he had that cheeky smile and the blonde hair, and he was in England. Unbeknownst to me, because he'd just come over, he was sort of the sweetheart of the tour because he was a good-looking boy and
could say things that other people get away with and get away with it.
And this blonde curly hair. Anyway, we went out for drinks, and he was a nice guy, and that was it. And worked the next day, and then before he left, he. We thought, they think they're a bit cocky, Sally and myself.
Well, they would have been.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. They thought they were the bee's knees. Yeah. And I said to them, "How about we meet in London, and we'll show you a bit of London and you come down." And I knew a guy who had a restaurant bar on the Thames. It was called the Sloop John D. I thought I'd take them on there, which we did. Met them. And Tertius with Sally, and I was it. And of course, Jack ended up having to pay. And he, not that we normally, the English girls always went halves, normally with boyfriends, but which Jack was quite shocked at. But anyway, he paid, and that was it. And then I started seeing him a little bit.
Were you taken with him immediately, Jackie, or did you find him a bit,
No, I didn't. I happened to be going out with somebody else at the time.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
And, but it wasn't anything particular, but it, and so I had to be a bit careful. And, but then after sort of speaking with him, he was actually pretty down to earth and genuinely a nice person.
We might come back to some of that with both Jack and Bob, actually, because you can probably talk a bit to this, Kathie, and I'll come to you afterwards. From the outside, people saw gregarious, particularly in their early parts of their career, always out, drinking, lads, all that sort of stuff. That wasn't 100% true, though, was it, Kath? Did you see a different side of both Jack but obviously Bob?
Well, I think that, when they went on the tour in England, it was about the time when Neil Coles was there. It was very staid. It was all navy blue and sort of grey V-neck sweaters.
Very golf.
And very golf. And it appealed to that kind of demographic. And then Jack and Bob and a number of others came on tour, Ian Stanley. And when Jackie was saying about the purple socks, they had... Often they went through the Middle East. Well, not the Middle East. They went through Asia, Hong Kong, and everywhere. And they had all these daft clothes made.
Yes.
Which looked absolutely ridiculous.
Didn't Jack say once that he used to go to his curtain maker's place?
Yes, he did.
Get the curtain fabric to make trousers.
Yeah, and he actually, because they were so garish and out there compared to the other golfers, we could claim it on tax.
Oh, I never knew that one.
There's a loophole.
There's a loophole.
They couldn't wear them out normally.
Well, I don't know. I have to tell you.
They think they were something else.
Well, my first date with Bob, I was used to dating people in three-piece suits, that had three fittings made to measure. And Bob came towards me. I was working, and the girl I was working with put her hand up her face, said, "Nice fella, but you're going to have to do something about the way he dresses," So I don't know. Bob's kind of got a bit confused with all of it there. He wore it socially and on the golf course. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you could claim it on tax because I made a lot of stuff for him, but because I used to do dressmaking. Yeah.
Okay.
But he just loved being different, but he wouldn't wear it normally out apart from on the golf course.
Well, that must have been a hook they had because I remember Bob had two pairs of trousers. One was navy blue with pale blue stitching and the other was black with red stitching. And I was forever stitching it up. I mean, I'm not a dressmaker like Jackie, but they must have thought, well, these girls can,
Well, were they right? You noticed.
They were,
They stood out.
And
But it
did.
was weird when I met Jack and started going out with him eventually, properly. It was I'd never been out with somebody blonde, although I had pictures up on my wall of blonde actors and things like that, year for years, and they were all blonde. But I always went out with people taller than me, and Jack always said he was taller than me, but.
Well, you're very tall.
I am tall,
aren't you?
yes.
And tall and slender and still look... Jackie told me earlier how old she is. I'm not going to reveal it, but trust me, she doesn't look anything like... Nor does Kath, I might say. The two of them are quite amazing.
But it was strange to go outside. And then I found out that he was 2 years younger than me. That was even, I thought...
This is horrible. How did you tell your mother?
This is weird.
Young and short.
Yeah.
And blonde. And
Young, short and blonde.
Australian of all things.
Well, he was about the same height as me, but, if I had heels on, I was a bit taller.
What was it like at the time? I have a picture in my mind of kind of early 70s London, England, and sort of just out of the hippie area, and Jack.
It was a good era.
What was it like travelling around and playing golf? And well, you weren't playing golf, obviously, but what was that like, living that lifestyle? Because that's before kids' mortgages and agents and Jack's accident, of course, and everything that came from that. He nearly won 2 majors, so kind of a superstar of golf. What was it like, that lifestyle on the road then?
For me, I was working non-stop.
While Jack was playing?
While Jack was playing.
So did you travel with him?
No, not always, no. And so really, to be honest, after 2 years of going out with him and that, and he asked me to get married, I felt that I didn't really know him properly because, he wasn't the type of guy that I was knocking on the door saying, would you like, we go out for dinner, that I'd used to. I'd see him some weeks. I'd go on tour with him when I wasn't working.
Was it a fabulous time that you had? Was it like a party?
I had a great time, yes. And then, but other times, obviously, I was working in the same area, so I couldn't. I was busy doing that. When I eventually introduced him to my mother, she loved him, and he eventually. He wanted me to go to the Dutch Open, which was the first tournament over in Europe after I met him.
Tour, of course, had started in 1972,
oh, yeah, it was big
didn't
then,
it?
big.
Literally just, I think it was the first year of the European Tour.
Yeah, it was. And he, anyway, I remember I was working with Kathie down south. We were heading down to Cornwall or somewhere. And I said, you never believe it. I got Jack wrote, because back then you didn't ring, you wrote letters. I said, Jack asked me to go to the Dutch Open with him. I said, oh, no, I've got to work, no way. He said, well, you can give that away for the week. I said, well, I can't. I'm full-time with Rothmans on all their promotion work. And funnily enough, normally did all the press rooms at the events.
So the journos and the media.
And then eventually I worked at Wimbledon while I was with them at all the press there, because they were the tennis guys were so used to me at the events we ran. I worked at Wimbledon. But anyway.
So just to put people in the picture, this was walking around giving away cigarettes was the job. Is that right?
Well, I wasn't.
No,
I wasn't giving cigarettes away. We had kiosks. Depending on the event, some places we might have only 3 or 4 girls, and you'd have a tennis tournament at the Albert Hall in the evening, and we'd be all in long evening dress, and you'd be handing cigarettes out to the boxes and things like that.
Staggering to think of today.
Yeah,
unthinkable.
Yeah, but we never tried to persuade them to start smoking. If they said we don't smoke, you would walk away. Right. And it was to ask them if they changed to our brand. Mind you, Jack always smoked Benson and Hedges, and he never, ever could I get him to change. So that was disappointing. But anyway.
He was a lifetime smoker, Jack, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Eventually gave it up some years before he died. But he asked me to go to the Dutch Open. I said, no, I can't. And lo and behold, he won.
He won it. Mm.
Yeah. And it gave him the money to travel and do the bits and pieces we want. He did a lot of travelling also with Dale Hayes.
I've had Dale Hayes on the podcast.
Yeah,
and he
Dale
talked
Hayes.
about Jack very fondly.
And he's they used to go travel together a lot.
Yeah. Was the money good, Jackie?
Wasn't great.
So,
no.
They're not like today, obviously.
Oh, no.
Money
it actually changed. It started to change big time after Jack's accident.
So mid-'80s, early 90s, we really saw the TV Greg Norman thing, then the Tiger Woods effect, obviously, after that.
And so he did, and then he came back and then he won the match play, the Benson Hedges big tournament they had. That was just before we got married. But Jack asked me if I'd go to Australia at the Christmas period and see if I liked Australia.
For the Australian Summer of Tournaments?
Yeah. And my boss, John King, then, who Jack knew, he said, Jackie, you're mad if you don't go and take a month off and go back with him, which I did. And a
bit like Bob and Kath.
Yeah.
Here we are. Things worked out. What do you remember about those times, Kath? And did we hear stories of players travelling together at the time? Did you guys all travel together? And was it you and Bob and Jackie and Jack? And did you sort of travel together as a group? How did it all work?
Well, we didn't actually. And it's funny, we were quite friendly, as we all were, when we went to the States with Bruce Devlin and Gloria and Bruce Crampton and Joan. And they would tell us how they did all travel together. Oh. They would all stay in the same motel. They would all of an evening cook together and carry frying pans, and they thought that our life was very luxurious, what we did. Right. We were the next generation down, and now we can look and say, well, look what they're earning now. And people said, was it relevant? I said it was and it wasn't. Because what they played for, you couldn't buy. Even if you won, it would give you maybe a deposit on a house, just maybe. Then the next generation after us, as Jackie said, you could buy the house with the winnings. So it was relative and not relative. And when Jackie was saying the travelling, she was the boss. She's been my boss twice, and I can tell you, she was difficult. She was very difficult at times.
I was wondering, I almost can't believe you've ever had a boss of any sort.
Well, they think they're the boss, but she was. And But we were both used to travelling, so I think for both of us, packing a suitcase wasn't difficult. Right. But when we were on the road, or I know that I'll travel with Bob, just for luck, I never emptied the suitcase. Everything kept on the bottom because there were 2 cuts then. There was a Friday cut and a Saturday cut. So you weren't safe on a Saturday. You had to be ready to go. And when they phoned up and said, we're off, you better have those suitcases by the door ready to go, which saved you paying another. It was always best if they played late early, because if they called you early enough, you didn't have to pay for another night's hotel on the Friday night.
The extraordinary things there. This is going to sound like a ridiculous question. What role did golf play in all of this for you? Obviously, golf is what Bob and Jack are doing for work. What was the role of golf for you, Kath? Did you have any interest in the game? Did you go out and watch it?
Well, the interest was that, I mean, they were there, and it was a revelation to me. I never knew a golfer. I come from London like Jackie does. I mean, I had a cousin that we viewed with great suspicion because he played golf. The rest of us were working. I'm working class.
Proper work, not playing golf and getting paid.
And if you didn't have 2 or 3 jobs, my grandmother would read the Hackney Gazette and say, there's a good job for you. And I used to say, Nan, I'm working 3, I can't fit it in. But once you're out there, I mean, what's not to like? They're playing. If you just, and Bob was excellent at good play and bad play. It kind of course, he wasn't pleased, but I think the Australians were very good at understanding that don't get miserable.
Yeah. Well, it's part of the key to being good at golf, isn't it?
They came off. They came off, and then they were
golf's done for the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, Jack would normally go straight to the driving range, and if he hadn't played well, or even if he had played well, he did do a lot of work out there.
What about you, Jackie, before you met Jack? What was your sort of knowledge or relationship with golf? Did you know anyone who played?
Yeah, my dad played golf at Dulwich and London, where we lived.
So you would have heard the names of famous golfers over the years, and watched a bit of the Open and some of those sorts of things.
And he played, and actually when we were really young, we'd go, my older brother and I, we'd go out on the golf course, and we'd climb through. They had wire fencing onto places that were bordering, and we climbed through where the balls had gone. People had, not thrown, but hit golf balls and couldn't get through, and we'd find a way of getting through. And if we found a golf ball, if it was a good golf ball, we got a shilling, and if it was a bad golf ball, I got 6pence. You know,
indeed. From the outside, golf looks, and international golf looks really glamorous and all the rest. So, what did you see about golf and what it took for both Jack and Bob to be successful, Jackie? Because that's the bit I think that most people, they don't see and don't think about.
No, I mean, I think Jack he might have been, he loved having a drink, and that was the great thing back then on the tour. All the boys used to get together and have a drink, and after, whereas it became a very much of an individual sport eventually in America, where people, it was always an individual sport, but back in America, they didn't want to go and have a drink. It was all, whereas in England, as long as it wasn't a men-only bar, whereas in Australia it was worse actually, because it was a men-only bar in a lot of places.
A lot of the golf clubs, you mean?
Yeah, the golf clubs and the hotels, but...
it's amazing to think this stuff was like less than a generation ago, isn't it?
It's crazy.
It's unthinkable in this day and age.
They didn't really cater for the women, and they certainly didn't cater for the children that the women might have if you got married.
To my next question, which was, were you included in any way in how the tour operated?
No, not really. We were just the wife, and I mean, obviously, I knew the press people, because obviously I'd been working in all the press market
cigarettes for years, of
and
course.
And also the British Open. I worked at that in the press room and everything, so I knew what happened behind the scenes. But yes, it was very much. We'd have our golf stick.
Oh, the cane that opens up as a seat.
Yeah, as a seat and an umbrella, a golf umbrella. And I've still got mine actually in the shed out the back. And we'd just walk around with that. And it wasn't until we had children that we had to find the other ways of doing it. But that's what we did. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I did enjoy the game of golf. I didn't ever particularly want to play it.
And did you?
No, I used to, because both our children played, and they'd take me to the driving range, or I'd take them, and then we'd hit balls and Jack, and they'd say, "Mum, it's not difficult. Just stand there and swing and hit the ball." And I'd miss it. You know, almost put my shoulder out doing it. And they say, "Mum, it's not difficult." I go, "I am not going to be a golfer. And I don't really want it. I'd like you to do the golf and I'll be a good watcher."
Yeah, that's exactly
so
right.
I was the good watcher. And it was not till later, I know, when Jack was playing golf and we were with a friend, and he wasn't playing much golf at the end. And a dear friend of ours, he was a club pro, and he said to me, "Jackie, you know, Sue, my wife, plays, and I'm going to teach you, and we're going to go away on golfing holidays." I said, "I'm sorry to disillusion you, Tony, but we are never going to go on golfing holidays, and you are never going to teach me how to play golf. We'll go on holiday, but not playing golf."
If it's golf, it's not a holiday, is it?
No, well, it isn't.
No, of course not.
I'd lived all my life with
Of course.
golf.
Were you Jack's travel agent, the way Kath told us she was essentially Bob's travel agent?
Yeah.
Did you take it? And was that the normal thing, sort of as a partnership? One person would organise travel
I think
and
if
stuff,
you
or?
were, definitely if you were, when you were married, it would have been that.
Yeah.
I mean, he did it before, obviously, but how he ever got to the planes on time, I don't know. But we never missed a plane when he was with me, so all good.
I guess what I was getting at before, I remember Bob told us that, you know, despite what people said, he would spend so much time practicing and working on his game. And
they did.
people sort of
Both
thought
the
so.
boys
Was Jack
did.
the same?
Yeah.
What do you think that drive is? I'll ask you first, Jackie.
Yeah.
You, Kathie, because to meet both Bob and Jack, who I did a bit, I don't pretend I was great mates with
Yeah.
Bob, they didn't seem driven on the outside.
Oh, they were.
You can't do what they did if you're not, can you?
He was very driven. Yeah, as I said, he was often the last round on the driving range or putting or whatever. Whenever he could, and before, you know, especially, you know, sometimes in the States, he'd need a shower before he played. He'd been hitting golf balls in the heat, you know. So he definitely was driven in practicing. He didn't just think he could just go out there and play.
Because he was gifted. Jack,
Oh, he
wasn't
was,
he?
yeah.
Everybody who played in the year when he was a junior said Jack. Bob Standard is the other one that people say is extraordinary to me.
No, he was a good talent.
Yeah, just amazing.
But and his father could have been a world champion, to be honest. But coming from Cessnock, you know, early on, and then he became a policeman in Sydney.
Which ruled you out of a lot of the elite clubs, didn't it?
Yeah.
If you were a policeman or a priest or a politician.
Or even a pro.
CPs,
a pro you couldn't join a club. Jack eventually joined, he was with Belmont and Newcastle when we lived in Newcastle. But, yeah, Jack's father used to win. You know, if it wasn't Jack, it was Jack Senior.
They were a formidable pair in Penrith.
Oh, yeah. And his mother was a good golfer. She started playing quite a lot when she stopped working. Yeah.
Got a story about Meg, which I'll share with you a bit later, which you might enjoy about Meg and Jack. What about Bob, Kath? Like Jack, you'd meet him, you wouldn't expect that he was the guy who's up early practicing and then out late at the driving range, but he was, wasn't he? And where do you think that drive, where does that come from? You two obviously know these two better than anybody.
He wasn't.
Well, Bob wasn't, I don't think, as driven as Jack.
Right.
No.
I think Jack was far more driven than Bob.
Right.
Bob, of course, practised and, of course, you know, put in the yards, not the hard yards.
We talked about this at the time, I think, didn't we? Where we thought whether Bob perhaps underachieved.
Yes, I think in later years he realised he did. And it wasn't that he was lazy. It was just that he had a formula that he wanted to follow. And I can remember where Jack would go out and practice, and I can remember that Bob would go out, and if he scored, you know, they were great mates. One did well one day, one did well the other day, and Jack would also didn't practice and he shot that, you know, or he viewed it that way. He just didn't practice as hard as Jack. And that was just the personality, you know, just different personalities. And I think that's why they were, you know, such lovely friends. And
I'm thinking about Jackie. He was a very blunt. You were never in any doubt about what Jack's opinion was about anything, ever. And it wouldn't matter who you were, from the President of the US to people at the golf club, he'd tell you what he thought. I wonder, have you any thoughts about where that personality comes from. I've always found Jack intriguing because he was simultaneously a laid-back, laconic Shane Warne and that driven Tiger Woods character, all bundled up into one, and somehow pulled it off.
And he was very simple in how if somebody asked him, some of the other boys, the younger boys would ask him things on the fact, he would give them a simple answer. He wouldn't sort of tell them heaps of things to do. He'd give them one thing to change or a couple of things, that's the most. And I think that was important too. He was very good at that. But he seemed to have the two. He seemed to be able to, his father was like that though.
Right.
His father didn't practice like Jack, but
I never met Jack Senior, but I always had the feeling that perhaps there was something about that relationship that made Jack the way he was.
No, he was a very, lovable person, very well liked. He ended up as Crown Sergeant at Balmain so he was a very likeable, cheeky smile and get away with everything. And
indeed,
yeah,
did indeed get away with everything, as you say. I want to ask about tournament winning and what happens inside the tent when somebody wins a tournament. We know that Bob won the Australian Open in '82, I'm going to say, which is a famous victory. Jack won the Australian Open in '79 and a couple of times in Europe as well. So, Kath, I want you to start. What happens when hubby wins a tournament, which is what his life's work has been about, with the inner circle?
Well, I don't think it was different. It's very hard when you're on the tour and one day is great, and I always knew if Bob had played well, he would be later at the golf course. If he didn't play well, he would come home earlier. The '82 Open, he didn't like the Australian. He didn't like the golf course at all after Jack Nicklaus had changed it. And when he went, I wasn't with him.
That's right, you were.
He said, I'll be home on Friday. He said, I just don't like the setup. It didn't suit his game. He didn't thought that it suited his game. And
they paired him with Jack, didn't they?
They paired him with Jack 3 days.
And he had to be a grown-up, is what he told us.
And he had to be a grown-up, and Jack Nicklaus gave him some of his balls, and Bob always thought that Jack Nicklaus, even back then, got the best balls that came out. They were wound the tightest, they were graded the best.
Probably right. Too.
And that was it. And he thought, but put the combination together, and he knew. And Bob always played well when he played with somebody that could play. If he played with a couple of guys that were just mediocre, then it didn't suit him at all. When he knew he had to come to the party, he could come to the party.
Live for the big occasion.
He'd live for the big occasion, but for the rest, he'd lollygag around and... but there was a great atmosphere when he won. Maybe not so much at home, although we were very jubilant and we liked it. But we had, if ever there was a tournament in Melbourne, we entertained on the Sunday night, win, lose or draw. Yeah. Everybody came.
Hotel Shearer.
Hotel Shearer, and it only made a difference that I would have to, I would go home at the end. Bob would be in the bar, and I knew by about 8:30, 9 o'clock, they'd all descend.
Be ready.
Be ready at home. Yeah, so...
Bob won in America as well.
Yes,
what was that like? Because that's a long way from home. That's a totally different set of circumstances. I can't imagine you had Hotel Shearer in the States.
No, we didn't. Well, funny enough, we had Hotel Baytree. Both Jackie and I, when the guys got their cards, we both went to South Carolina. And Jackie and I both lived in South Carolina. Well, Jackie and Jack and Bob and I lived there. And it was funny because they both had a group of people around them. Bob had a group of friends at Baytree and Jack had a group of friends, and they would play. And, of course, they loved both boys being home because they'd bet against one another and big bets.
So American friendship.
American friendship. So you had that kind of... When Bob won in Tallahassee, the mayor flew down in his plane and from Myrtle Beach, and a group that had watched Bob play. And then when Jack won, it was the same thing. His group came down. So people were attracted to them because of who they were. Also, they could play.
Yeah, well,
that's the whole point, And I read somewhere it said, if a golfer goes to heaven, back then it goes to Myrtle Beach. And that's where we were living. So,
of course, is there any other square kilometre on earth? I think it is. It's crazy.
I think you must realise that, they were playing then. I was on the tour one year, 42 weeks. So they were playing week after week after week. So you couldn't afford to be miserable on one week because you were tinning up the next week. If you hadn't made the cut, then you had to pre-queue on the Monday. So it was a profession. It was a job. You were serious when you need to be serious and fun when you weren't. And Bob would always say, Mr. Cup, well, we're in next week, or... It was, this when they say, I'm only playing 19 weeks this year. I think, what are they doing the rest of the time?
I mean, in England,
spending more time with my family.
Yeah.
You almost hear the families thinking, really?
God.
In England, I mean, they were paid automatically every week, but and they played back then. They played, started on a Wednesday and finished on a Friday. You didn't play golf on a Sunday.
Saturday, finished on a Saturday.
Sorry, finished on a Saturday. They didn't play golf on a Sunday. And that's why we ended up getting married on a Sunday. But also on the Sunday they did all the variety ones. So that's when we went to the variety show, Pro-Ams. Right. And, you'd play with people like Sean Connery and Jimmy Talbot and what's his name, the little guy?
Ronnie Corbett.
Yeah, he became a really good friend of ours because I remember Jack and I drove in the car park one day behind him, and he got out of his car and he went to get something out of the boot, and he was in a massive big, Rolls Royce, and he went to put the boot up and he got stuck on the boot and he's hanging with his hand on the boot. And his feet are off the ground, and we're in the car cracking ourselves with laughter.
You imagine if we'd had mobile phones then.
Oh,
that's a viral video there, Ronnie Corbett hanging from
absolutely. I can still see him now.
You must have both of you must have met some famous people, not just golfers over time. Golf attracts, doesn't it, all the celebrities and people from other sports. It's the thing that footballers do when they're not playing football. You mentioned sort of Ronnie Corbett. Who else did you did Jack hang with any of those sort of people? And the same question about Bob, did you?
Oh, yeah, we did. We saw them a lot. And Bruce Forsyth was another one that always used to play in the tournaments, and some of the jockeys. And, and actually another thing, when Kathie was talking about some of the senior golfers to ours, the next stage, we were sort of back from, like your Tom Weiskopf's and your Jack Nicklaus's and people like that, and the Gary Players. Jack used to always find Jack, and we became very good friends with them for all the time we were there. And he'd play in the practice round because he'd see things that Jack did and he would try them after he'd seen them in the practice round. And they'd often have a game, Jack would say, well, how about you get Tom and I'll get somebody and we'll come out in the, practice round, and they'd have a comp.
Famously, they did at the 1975 Open.
Exactly.
We'll come back to that.
That's
we'll
right.
talk
You're right.
a bit about
How do you know that?
Been around the game.
Yeah.
What about you, Kath? Did Bob run with the celebrities? A laconic character and an outgoing guy, but a more reserved character than Jack is how I would describe Bob.
Oh, absolutely. Bob was never interested in running with the, celebs. And but Jack Nicklaus was one apart because he would seek out you more than you would seek out him, which was a difference. But Bob had a standing with a standing practice round, him and Ian Stanley with Ronnie Shade, Harry Bannerman, and they would bet, and that was their set that they used to do. So he was more, what shall I say, contained. And Jack was always much more Hollywood than Bob ever was. He was there a year before Bob ever went over. Jack went over. I think he was sponsored over there when he first went. The very first year he was there.
Yeah.
And he was kind of the leader of what was going on, and he was attracted more to the personalities, and maybe they were more attracted to him.
Bob didn't mind the limelight, but Jack was very happy in the
limelight. Yes, very much.
He was comfortable in that kind of thing. Yes, definitely.
Bob was never sought anybody of any great name, although, as I say, there were a couple, and they were, when we were in the States, it was Dana Quigley and just a group that he liked to run with there.
He's a player's player, Bob, wasn't he? Very much
and I think somebody said that to me. He was a player's player. Yeah.
Jack didn't he didn't want to meet them because they were celebrities.
No.
They actually
would
sought
be drawn
him.
to him.
Yeah.
It's a Shane Warne thing, I think.
It's weird, yes. I mean, Jeff Lewis, the famous jockey, over there, He and his wife, he was married to an Australian girl and things like that.
And of course, Jack was a mad keen sports lover.
Well,
I'm not sure about Bob.
And horses.
And loved all sports.
And we had horses.
Horse racing. Was Bob a sports lover?
Bob was a great fan of. He loved the cricket, but Aussie rules, because Bob played Aussie rules. He played for Victoria.
Victoria, wasn't he? You can't avoid it.
Absolutely, he was the Aussie, and that was his love. And perhaps those of that era, he would play with the Aussie rules player was at Southern. He would always go crazy when they turn up in jeans and not with a collared shirt, and he'd that would make him nuts.
Take all the Sean Connery, but if somebody from Essendon turned up at Southern.
No. Well, it was always the Collingwood players. It was Trevor Barker that was our neighbour round the corner, him from St Kilda, and they were the group that Bob liked to be with. He
felt comfortable with, didn't he? He felt comfortable with them.
Yeah, but I think Bob felt comfortable with anybody.
Yeah.
He didn't fear anybody,
No.
He just, if they were
he didn't
there,
shy
it was
away
great.
from the limelight, but never sought it.
No, never sought it. No, he just liked to play his own game. He loved Southern, to the day he died. That was his home from home. And
pie in a pot. Wednesdays, was it? It was Tuesdays? Pie
no, he played. No. Monday morning, yes. Pot and something or the other.
Pot and a pie.
Something or the other. Pot and a pie, that's it. And a red wine he used to slip in as well. And then Wednesday, Thursday and Saturday. He wouldn't miss a Saturday. And actually he missed the Saturday before he died. They were playing foursomes. He didn't like foursomes, and he didn't.
Half a golf game.
He said, I don't feel so. I'm not going to play, which was unusual. But he was ready for the Monday.
Right.
I never made the Monday.
Right up until that's amazing.
Right up until that, yeah.
Golf's a funny game competitively, Kath, where you compete against, but not directly, everybody else in the field. You ultimately only compete against yourself professionally.
Well, Bob would never have that. He said you play in the golf course.
Right, that's right.
Unless it's match play. He would never have anything,
So anybody who plays golf knows this. You can be playing on a Wednesday with your mate, and every time he tops one, you laugh at him and you heap it. But when he plays well, you can't help but sort of want to cheer him on. It's an odd thing, even though you're kind of playing against him. What's it like at the professional level? So Jack and Bob are playing a tournament, and Jack's playing well and Bob's not, or Bob's playing well and Jack's not. Is there any impact at all beyond that, or is that just work and you two never think about it?
I think that I like to think Bob was never envious, and it always amazed me, and it was something I would ponder and admire. I don't think Bob ever, in the 50 years nearly we were together, he never once had, I don't think he had an envious bone in his body. He never wanted to be anybody else but himself. And I think that carried on. Of course, you have to think, if you're on the land to, not making it the following year, you have to think, well, God, I've got to move myself. But Bob always sort of said, it's me and the golf course. And he always said, well, the putt's going to go in or not go in. He couldn't understand all this dangling about and dangling, looking to the left, looking to the right. He says, going in or not going in, move on. Slow play drove him crazy as well.
One of my favourite ever sayings is all putts are a 50-50 proposition. They're either going to go in or they're not. Forget about all this 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet. It's 50-50. It's going in or it's not going in.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Tiff Tough Hybrid Bermuda means less work and more play. Tough by name and by nature, this turf variety, supplied exclusively by Lawn Solutions Australia, is the perfect choice for your home lawn. With superior drought tolerance, speedy recovery and toughness, Tiff Tough really is the smart grass. For more information and to find your nearest accredited supplier, head to lawnsolutionsaustralia.com.au. What was Jack like about it? Did you ever talk much about golf or his thoughts on the game? Or?
Yes, he did. But I think he just, when he finished playing golf, he obviously learned. He did actually learn again with one arm, but he didn't go back to playing as much as he was, obviously. Plus, he was involved in so many other things. So he was working, but he wasn't necessarily playing golf all the time.
Finally, too busy for golf.
He was too busy.
Yeah, indeed.
And because there was so many, actually it was weird. A lot of people, when we had the memorial service, and they went through all his life, what he succeeded in after his accident was seemed greater than when he was doing his golf, although he succeeded in his golf too. You know, he won in America and he won this and did this. But what he did after with the Junior Golf Foundation, the golf course designing, so much, and we used to run this big celebrity tournament, we're in our 43rd year this year.
Anybody who knows anything about golf in Australia would readily admit that Jack's contribution to the game is unlikely to be surpassed, I would think, any time. Certainly
even
in the near
though I was
future.
married to him, I agree totally. Yeah. I think he's given back and not made money out of it.
No.
He's given back.
You've skipped ahead there, Jackie, and it's not the elephant in the room, but you can't talk about Jack and his career without talking about the accident in 1983. No. If anybody doesn't know, walked into a plane propeller, lost his right arm, his right eye.
Yeah.
Probably should have died, it might be said.
Yeah.
I'll get your thoughts on your memories of that time, which I've no doubt you've been asked about plenty of times, and you've no doubt recounted the story many times. I want to hear what you remember about that time too, Kath, being, I would imagine, one of Jackie's, if not her best friend here in Australia, the two of you being transplanted from England. But tell us what your memories of what happened then, Jackie, and the sort of the aftermath.
Yeah, we
you weren't there, were you?
No, I wasn't. And we were only back, we had two children. We had Christy, who was born in Australia.
With us just over at the bench there, keeping an eye on things.
She's, she was 4, and 5, actually. And Clint was 2, just turned 2. And, who was born in America, in Myrtle Beach. And, we were back here because Christy was starting school, and Jack always wanted his children to go to school in Australia. And I agreed. I said, I'd rather go there than stay in America and you can play all the other because he'd done well, and we were able to do that. And
financially to decide what he wanted to do then.
And we'd bought a house in Newcastle, Lake Macquarie, mainly so we could go fishing. And also for the first 4 years, I said, I'm not having any children for 4 years. I want to get to know you. And that's what happened. We toured together in America. We went to America, we toured there, and then when we had Christy, I said it's time we had, a home. So I've got some wet place to go a couple of weeks a year, yeah. And we had the home in Australia. But, he used to go down to watch the AFL, would you be, although he was a mad rugby league supporter.
Well, Swans were reasonably new then in Sydney, weren't they? They just
new,
transplanted from Melbourne. It was a big deal.
Yeah, supporting them down in Sydney. And they used to go with a friend who had a light aircraft, and they went down on the plane. There was probably 6 of them, and went to see the Swans game, and left. And it was that particular night. It was raining. Heavily.
There's so much detail about. I know that there's been contention about the accident. There was a long time legal case. I don't need you to go into the details if you don't want to. But but then there was where the small planes landed. You could literally walk on. Just walk onto the runway.
Yeah, and suddenly afterwards there were big fences up. But
of course.
And the taxis, there were no taxis, and anyway. Jack eventually, some of the boys had a taxi, and Jack and this other guy came in last. And unfortunately, when they got there, as I said, it was dark, raining, and the person in the car, the wife of somebody, offered to give them a lift, and she was asking him about donating something for a charity, and he was still sitting there, and the guy started the plane because a few of the boys were wanting to get home to see other things. And anyway, saw, and he ran to try and stop it, and didn't see the propeller going round. And luckily, the pilot was stopped it, but it was too late. And Jack was waving his right arm, and it took his right arm off up near the shoulder, just below the shoulder, went through his face, losing his right eye, and straight through his middle in his intestine. And they didn't give him, actually they rang me in Newcastle and said, we doubt he'll be alive when you get here.
So who was they? How did you find out about? What?
I heard through Air Pelican that we used to get the planes down to Sydney back then because you couldn't fly out of Newcastle. That was RAF stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously the pilots, we used to go down there a lot. One of the pilots told a friend of ours and they came over and knocked on the door, and I was home with the children, actually sewing, and the kids were asleep, and they said, you've got to, we've got to take you down. So one of the boys took me down and drove me down, and the other couple stayed and looked after the kids for a couple of days.
Everything must be a blur when something like that happens.
It is.
Jackie. Mercifully, most of us will never get news like that, but it would be surreal.
Well, it was the fact that I didn't know what I was going to, and also whether he'd be dead or alive. And when I got there, he was in the very strong, heavy, ICU, intensive care, and they, what happened at the actual, luckily, the three people that were on call that had to deal with him, one was Professor Hollows,
Fred Hollows,
specialist, and who was a good friend of ours eventually, and used to always walk into the ICU with a long mohair jumper that was, those ones that used to stretch all the way with a pipe in his mouth. He wasn't on, but he to annoy the nurses.
He was another character
too.
He
was, absolutely. And his wife, well, they weren't married then.
And another who did amazingly
good
things
did.
For the world.
And continuing on too.
For the whole world,
And he and a Jim Neal, Dr. Jim Neal, who was a golfer. He was a member at the Australian. And he'd been out playing that day, but he was on call. And I can't remember the guy for his arm, but I always remember him telling me, he said, look, Jackie, I've done the best I could with the nerve endings on his arm. And Professor Hollows actually sorted his eye out and also stitched his whole face up right across his face, his top of his nose down past his mouth.
You can't imagine the injuries that a plane cause.
And he actually never had plastic surgery.
Really?
No.
Wow. That's
never,
amazing.
Which is amazing.
Testament to Fred Hollows.
It is.
Isn't it?
Incredible. And Jim Neal was the one that had to save his life, basically. So
somebody up there was looking down. You'd have to think in some ways, wouldn't you?
Yeah, he had another call, and I always said to him, through his life, he got that many things. I mean, he got what do you call it? He got meningococcal later in life, but he got septicemia.
Right.
So when he was in hospital, and he got that in hospital, and they had to open his stomach up again, and let it be open.
Breathe.
And I used to sit there every day and watch his stomach actually heal.
Wow.
Amazing.
That's
no, it was amazing what the body can do.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
do you know what I did the first day I saw Jack, and he was in the intensive care with one other person, and his family was there, and it was a young guy, and he was a garbo. And it was when the boys used to have to get the
run behind the trucks and pick up the
and jump on the back and put it down. And he'd fallen off the back and been hit by a car.
Oh, dear.
And he didn't have any damage to himself, but he was unconscious. He was a
brain injury.
Brain injury, and he never regained. In fact, we used to bump into his brother many years because he worked at the airport. And whenever we saw him, we'd say, how's he going? How's he going? He said, oh, he's in a house now next to my parents, and he's got a full-time nurse. I think it was like 25 years later, he died.
Wow.
All that time. And I tell you what, all the family used to come in every day and sit there, and I'd go, well, I'm sitting with Jack, and he's completely bandaged up all over. And I thought to myself, how lucky am I? What am I doing, worried when, yes, I don't know if he's going to live or die, but for some weeks after, because he was on the ventilator, but the chance of him waking up probably could be nil. And they still came in every day.
Hope for them.
No hope whatsoever.
Hope.
And anyway, eventually I didn't let the children come in. Nobody could come in and see him apart from his mother and father. And
was Jack awake at any point?
He did wake up eventually.
Right.
Yeah. And he could speak eventually when they took the ventilator off. But again, they didn't know whether he was going to survive after they took it off. But it was amazing, really. And I must say, I want to give good credit to the doctors and also the people that protected us from the papers.
The media.
The media was horrific, and we did not have one photo taken apart from the one when we came out of hospital.
Yeah.
I did a couple of press things, and Jack didn't. And funny enough, I looked online one day and I saw some pictures, supposedly Jack, on his site, and I had to get permission to write to the people who did this, and it wasn't him.
They'd just taken some pictures from elsewhere and said this was Jack.
Very, very suspicious, because if kids had got on it, you could push on the site and it would go to the most horrific accidents.
Oh, God.
And they'd done it illegally. You
wonder
anyway,
what's wrong with us as a species sometimes, don't you?
So anyway, he did survive, thank God. We were there many weeks. When the first time I took the children in was on Christy's birthday, her 5th birthday. And she and my mother-in-law said, no, don't, you can't. He's still in, but he wasn't in, he was in intensive care, but there was a lot of people, a lot more people. I said, Mum, he's got to see them. He needs to see the children. And I said, they won't see anybody else. And, they got there and there was Clint crawling all over his stomach that had all these tubes, and it was all sort of,
Kids.
Yeah.
They put
and
perspective.
never said a word about anything. And never saw anybody else in there. And it was the best thing that I did for them to see Christy and Clint.
Yeah.
And he eventually, we always used to look out of the window at the hospital at Prince of Wales, and there was a pub across the road, and he said, one day I'm going to go over there and we're going to have some lunch with the boys and have a drink. And he did. That's where we went the first day.
I can imagine he would have made a beeline for it as soon as he could walk. Kath, what do you remember about that time? You must have been, I would imagine, very important to Jackie. There were messages coming in from all over the world. Jack Nicklaus, I know, sent a video message.
Yeah.
Golfers around the world, Seve Ballesteros, name a high-profile golfer. You were, I would imagine, were you here in Australia at the time when it happened? And what's your recollection?
We were in the States.
You were in the US.
We were in the US.
Yeah, you were. Because they didn't come over.
Right.
We came back to put.
You came back for
early.
Other reasons.
Yeah. And we were in the US because I was very clear when you were talking about it where I was, and then I thought, maybe I've got it wrong, but I can remember exactly where I was. I can remember taking the phone call. I can remember.
Who rang you? Who let you know? Can you remember?
Who rang us?
And then what do you do from the other side of the world? Because now you've got that awful conundrum, haven't you? Should I ring, or has Jackie got enough to worry about without
Well,
me
I know I
pestering?
did. I know I didn't ring. I didn't ring because it was such early. Somebody called us. A mutual friend called to say, Jack's had a terrible accident. And you know, it's funny what you can remember. I remember the bed linen. I was in the bedroom, and I remember this lemon bed linen. Why? Strange things happen in your mind. And I said, but what do you mean? I kept saying, and Bob said, what's happened? What's happened? And it was just unbelievable.
It's the same
it was
sort of surreal feeling that Jackie
surreal. I mean, nothing like what Jackie had. But what do we do? Then there was, well, what do we do? And how do we find out? And then, Bob started making phone calls. Have you heard anything? Anybody connected? Do you know what it is? Is he? Because as Jackie said, I mean, there wasn't a lot of hope of survival in the early stages. And then we heard that the pilot, he never would have lived had the pilot not turned the engine on, and instead of it going clockwise, it was going anti-clockwise. It had slowed down. Because he saw him running, Ronnie saw him running towards the plane, and it had slowed down. We knew and we didn't know.
Yeah.
And you kind of in silence
Well, you've got
And
no
then
internet.
you've got no
Zoom,
internet.
No Skype,
We didn't have mobile
text
phones.
messaging.
No
mobile phone.
We had a phone beside the bed because I remember picking up the phone, and I was beside the phone, and it was in the middle of the night. It was, it was funny communication.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the boys that was in the plane, he was just one of the top surf guys at one of the beaches, and he literally basically saved his life there with them by
Pressure on him.
yeah, and cuddling him because he lost every little bit of his blood. Yeah,
And the aftermath was quite, because now we're in the States,
Yes.
and now it's filtering through what's happened. So we spent an enormous amount of time.
Everybody would be coming to you to get
Everybody
information.
coming and how's Jackie and all that. Well, Jackie was, you couldn't contact Jackie. I mean, I wouldn't have contacted Jackie. All of her strength and energy was where it needed to be, and I knew the children would be taken care of. And then we were like the person that, have you heard anything? Have you heard anything today? Have you heard anything tomorrow? And this went on for quite some time. I felt that it made Bob ill at one point.
I was going to say, how did Bob react? Because
Bob became quite ill with the news.
Yeah.
He could not.
probably couldn't comprehend
He
it.
couldn't
It's very hard
comprehend.
to, yeah.
And he
It was
just
so out of
couldn't.
the blue too, wasn't it?
It was so sudden and so out of the blue
it's so bizarre.
that I think it.
In a car accident, or fell off a ladder, or got hit by a horse.
It had to be different, you see.
I know.
I always said to him, Dale, with all the things you've had through your life, God, you're not good enough to go to heaven. He keeps chucking you back at me. I can't get rid of you.
Like
And you know
underweight fish.
what? You know when he died? 2 minutes into Good Friday.
Really?
And I turned to Christy and I said, see, God now loves him. He's taking him up there. Yeah, at last I got rid of him. No, joking, but
I know,
we used to always have that laugh about it.
I know. It was one time when Bob didn't play golf.
Right.
He stopped playing for a while, and that was the biggest form of grief that you would see with Bob. If he didn't play, or if he didn't, it was something terribly serious. I remember he went up to Baytree. I'm like a stunned mullet for once, and Bob went up to Baytree and couldn't play. Wow. Couldn't play. So that was how it affected everybody. And then, then we had the big benefit in Myrtle Beach where everybody came. I mean, everybody came and played in a pro-am there, and our house was our condominium wasn't a house, it was a condo. That was where everybody brought their luggage. I was Hotel Shearer, and I had labels, and then we had breakfast there once again.
Now it's an event, Kath, and now
it's an
you're in your
event.
element.
And now I'm there with everybody that flew in on their planes, and if they couldn't get there, Tom Watson couldn't get there, he had a prior engagement, and he sent the money that he earned on that day, or that he was playing for, he sent that. And we were bumper to bumper again, and great.
Amazing what people did.
Yeah.
Clearly in golf, we know that it was a huge story. But in America, outside of golf, did it make much Because here in Australia, of course, it was a huge story.
Oh, it's huge. Well, it's huge. It was huge.
Well.
It's huge in Myrtle Beach.
Yeah,
because
and England too, because he was top of the tree at England. He was number one there when we left.
That was the and the benefit day. He was playing in the States, and that was extraordinary for a place like Baytree, where we lived, to have that calibre of player there. They had 3 golf courses there, the green, gold and silver, and to have that calibre, I mean, it was, I think, the biggest event that they've had in Myrtle Beach.
I've actually got a couple of pictures where they've the faces of them, and they're all signed the big photo of them, and he had it in his office. But
I've got the album of every
Have you?
group that played. The black and white photo was taken of every group that played there.
Now, if we were doing a video podcast,
Well,
I'd have you going to look for that right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I could put my hands up.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that. But
Every
now 'cause
group.
you've mentioned it.
but it was amazing. Yeah.
Jack kind of had two lives, didn't he, Jack?
Yeah, he did.
There was before and
He
there was
did.
after the accident. And both were incredibly full.
Well, it was weird because I'd have press. I remember this press guy rang me about 5 years or 10 years after, and he actually said to me, "You know what day it is?" And I said, "No, what day? What day is it?" And he said, "It's the such and such date of the month." And what was that? What did I say? It was July, and he said. Do you mean to say you don't know that this was the day Jack had his accident?
It was like the 10th anniversary or something, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I said, no, to be honest, I didn't know. I said, I've forgotten that a long while ago. I said, why would I want to remember the day he had his accident?
But how could you not, Jackie? So you understand this. I can't think of anybody else who could manage to do this. But you never thought of Jack as the bloke that got hit by the plane.
No.
You thought of Jack as the commentator or
Yeah.
the golfer or
Yes,
the head
I
of the
know.
Junior Golf
Yeah.
Foundation who happened to have been hit by a plane. It's like you didn't know it.
Yeah.
But it never defined him. How
No.
did he manage that? How did you all manage to make that?
Well,
Well, he managed that because of her, and I can tell you that right now, without her saying anything, he managed that because of her. Jackie once said, I don't see Jack as disabled.
yeah, and I didn't.
I honestly, I said, he's got one arm, and one eye.
Jackie, are you looking in the right place?
Let's.
I don't like to point out the
I don't
obvious,
want to give you a slap, but
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. This is it. So she said, no, I don't see it. So that and there alone, by her saying that and that sentence, can tell you what she thought and how she was. And I remember, and I know she won't mind me saying this, well, maybe she will, but I'm going to say it anyway. She would go in and see Jack and always be on the up when she saw him.
I never cried.
And she would go out and break her heart, as the whole family may do. But when she went in there fighting, and she went in there fighting for him, and she, made him believe, if he didn't believe, that this is the future and this is where we're going now. So that is, I would say, the biggest reason of Jack's recovery and success afterwards would be Jackie.
Because he got on with it, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He did get on. Well, I think I said to him when we got home eventually, because the kids were staying with Jack's parents in Carlingford, and I'll tell you one thing, a press guy actually knocked on the door one day and asked his father if he could take a picture of Jack in intensive care.
Doesn't sound like a great idea.
Can you imagine what his father said?
I can imagine, yes.
But anyway, I just felt when we got home eventually, because Jack had to do a lot of rehabilitation at Mount Wilga at Hornsby, and they were marvellous. And he used to, a bus used to pick him up, one of the buses with about 10, 12 people in. And I'd say, oh, come on, we'll go out and wave Daddy goodbye on the school bus, and things like that. And off he'd go for the day. And he learnt so many different things. And in the hospital, we had to go through a lot because he had to learn to write with his left hand. And actually, he wrote exactly the same eventually as his right hand. Yeah.
That's extraordinary, isn't it?
And he hit the ball.
A choice.
And he nenever changed. He played with right-hand clubs.
Yep, yeah.
So, so anyway, we eventually got home to our house at Warners Bay in Newcastle. And I said to him, now, Dar, I've got two little ones. And I said, Christy's just about to start school. I said, you have got to become independent. You don't want me for the rest of your life be saying, are you all right? Do you want me to help? Do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do that? I said, if you need help, you ask or you try or we do it. So anyway.
Was that hard to say, Jackie?
It was at the time, but I had to.
You almost feel cruel.
I did feel cruel, but I had to do this because it made him, I said, you want to eventually go away and do something on your own. You want to be independent. You don't want me following you around for the rest of your life doing things. And that's what we did. He, you know, I remember when the kids wanted to take him swimming, and they looked at me and they said, Daddy's going to go around in circles. And I remember it was up in the Gold Coast. We were staying in a hotel, and when he was commentating, and he didn't. He swam straight for the first time, and he used to love swimming because we had a big pool at home, and he swim. But I remember packing his case when he first went away, and he couldn't do his tie properly, and he always wore a proper tie, and I used to tie it on myself, or tie it on him, and then take it off and leave it sort of open, leave it so it was made, and then he'd put it over his head himself, one-handed, and pull one with one hand with his teeth and the other, to tie it up. And then eventually we decided to go to the bow tie, which he was well known for, with the bow tie, and I'd have it made with the clip.
So you could just clip it on.
Yeah, and clip it underneath the collar.
Because everything's extraordinarily difficult with one hand, isn't it? From doing up a zipper,
yes,
to undoing a button, to doing a button up.
Doing a shoelace, he had to put the lace. He was taught to put the lace, take the lace out completely, tie a knot at one end, then go through and thread it through all the way through as you tied it with two laces. And then he'd just tie a knot in the end, and like a little bow, or one bow type thing, and then he'd stick it down the side.
Right.
So I'd have cut some of the lace off so it wasn't so long, and then he'd stick it down the side of the shoes. So he did that. And he learned how to do all the different things. Drive a car, he had to have a special knob and a special license for that. And he did become very independent.
Well,
totally independent.
Best and best known TV commentators.
Yeah.
Built the Jack Newton Junior Golf Foundation to which this day is churning out the future of Australian
it's the
elite
best
golf.
One. I must say it's the best one in Australia. Well, there isn't one left in Australia. None of them are still going.
Right. And driven completely by Jack personally. I mean, that doesn't happen because he's attached his name to it. It happened because
Clint's now chairman there, so he keeps an eye on what's going on. We've got great people.
There's a good structure in place, isn't
it?
It's
a great structure.
Where it can survive without Jack. There was a time when that wasn't true.
No, but it can survive. We had good people, and eventually good chair people. He got a good board and people in that knew what they're doing, and the majority of them are still there.
Two things on Jack that I want to finish up with, because then I've got some other questions that's not so much about those guys, it's more about you. The 1975 Open I wanted to ask you about, because you obviously know it better than we do. So Jack lost in a playoff to Tom Watson.
Yes.
But that was the culmination of an extraordinary week, wasn't it? It started with a practice round with Jack and the other Australian whose name I can't remember now. Jack, and they played against Jack Nicklaus and somebody else?
No, it was John O'Leary.
Right. Look, you tell the story, and then the other thing I wanted to know about that was the ridiculous bounce that Tom Watson got.
Yeah.
All of his money to Jack's benefit fund after what happened at the 1975.
Oh, you mean in the Open?
In the Open.
Are you talking about the practice round?
Yes, in the practice round.
Yeah.
So Jack and somebody...
Actually, Jack got a first course record there.
Yes.
Of 75. He used to wear it. Carnoustie, he used to wear it. I nearly put it on actually today. We had it done for him because, and
like a tie pin or something.
No, it was on a gold chain.
Oh, okay.
And it was a scorecard.
Oh, wonderful.
On both sides. Yeah.
Oh, fabulous. But you tell the story of what sort of unfolded there.
This was before, when he played in the practice round.
They played the practice round.
Yeah, they played the practice round.
And Jack went on to almost win the tournament.
Yeah, and we actually stayed for the first time in the other side over on St Andrews, and we stayed at the hotel there overlooking the 18th. And we were staying there, which was nice. And I used to always pick up his balls in the morning because he liked to practice there. And he'd try and hit me most of the time when I was picking practice balls up.
What, were you jagging for him?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
did you ever do that, Kath, for Bob?
Did I ever stand at the end of the practice fairway?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not seeing it, but did you?
Well, maybe I did.
Maybe a couple of, did you have the baseball
I
glove?
did try and I did once caddy for him,
Right.
and did beautifully, and it was raining and everything else. It was only in a practice round. I got to the 18th hole. And somehow picked up the bag the wrong way and all the clubs fell out. He said, "You're sacked." That was it. So
Might have been the best thing the two of you ever decided together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you were
Anyway, he
shagging
was
balls.
shagging balls for him, and then we'd get on the ferry across from
Oh, right, okay. I didn't
uh,
even know there was such a thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's St Andrews across the water because it was hard to get all the way around.
Around
There was
on the
only
road,
one
that's right. It's
road
quite
in
the
and out.
commute,
Oh,
yeah.
it was a nightmare back then. And we got the ferry, and it would drop you right at the first tee
Oh, perfect.
at Carnoustie.
Didn't know there was
And
a ferry there.
yeah, there you go. You see.
I wonder if it still runs.
It might
Excellent
be.
stuff, yeah.
And anyway, when he was playing with Jack Nicklaus there, he actually Jack would hear the noise of the ferry, and I often used to say to him, he'd say to me, "You wouldn't believe I was talking to Jack, and he didn't even hear the noise. That he was so one-minded, focused, and he never heard that noise, any noise of it." But anyway, he played 4 rounds and brilliantly, and they tied, and
Watson, isn't it?
with Tom Watson, and we'd already checked out of the hotel.
Oh, because it's an 18-hole playoff the next day, isn't it?
Yeah,
Wonder.
and it was the last one that happened, and so I had to go back. I had to go back and try and check in, and he wanted the same room and everything.
Yes, of course.
We actually had dinner with Tom Watson that night. Not Tom Watson.
I was going to say.
Tom Weisskopf.
I was going to say that would have been
That was
awkward.
very awkward. Tom Weisskopf and his wife Judy, and we got the same room. They put us in that same room. We checked back in again, and everything was the same. Did exactly the same as we did. I booked a fox balls for him the next morning and did exactly the same. And it was raining that day, the majority of the way round. It was one of the longest rounds I've ever walked, I think. It was just so close most of the time. Then to the last hole.
Because Jack was the underdog. Tom
He was the
Watson's
underdog.
already
Everybody, Tom Watson.
a superstar.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I mean, Jack was.
crazy hat that he had. He was quite the figure, wasn't he, Tom?
He was.
Too.
Yeah, and but it was amazing, and but he it was just one of those things. I always said to him, because I've never said this to him, and I've never been a person for cars, but I said. He said, if you win, I want you to buy me a Mercedes Sports. And I said, you bastard.
So determined was he not to buy you that car?
You lost because of that. And I always remember, it wasn't after the 18-hole playoff, it was exhausting, actually. Yeah. We'd already done I wasn't even
holes.
playing,
Yeah.
And plus that it was the weather. And I just was exhausted, and out of exhaustion, I was crying, and it wasn't so much obviously I was sad he was lost, but the fact that it was an emotional cry that I just had to let it out. And I remember that the next day, there was this picture of us both on the front page of every flipping paper in England of us crying. Me crying and him, next to me. And a photographer said to me a couple of days later, or the next tournament or something, he said, do you regret doing that? I said, regret it? What are you talking about? I said, I was emotional. I was exhausted. I needed to let my emotions out. He said, oh, really? It was, typical. But anyway.
There were two things that happened that day that were not odd. The one that wasn't odd. His second shot to the 18th, missed carrying the bunker by less than a foot with a 2-iron.
Yeah.
At the 18th at Canoes, you can't do much more than that. That's cruel, but that's golf. But Tom Watson hooked his ball. It was the 14th the par 3. There's out of bounds down the left, and there was a strand wire fence, and the wire could only be a couple of millimetres.
It was.
And it hit the wire.
Yeah.
He hooked it, it hit the wire and came back into play.
Yeah.
Even for golf, that's not normal.
Oh, no, it isn't.
There's a not meant to be about that, isn't there?
It obviously wasn't meant to be. Yeah, that's right.
Did Jack ever talk about that?
He did, but, Jack was always very, the one he lost, but he was pretty,
Once it's over, it's
nothing
you can do.
He tried his best.
Yeah.
And then missed by that, or whatever it was. It wasn't that long. Yeah. It was, and I know a guy came up to me when I was waiting for him to come off eventually, and he said, why did you go and miss that ball? I felt like saying, you try and flip and hit it. Yeah. They're weird people, but...
There are strange people.
Yeah, but it was a moment he lost, but, that's life, and it didn't... we actually just moved on and,
Yeah, wasn't the end of him, was it? He certainly continued to play well after that as well. This has been way too much about the men. Let's be honest. Kath, how are you going? We lost Bob in January.
Mm-hmm.
How are you sort of going and being? For people, lots of people in golf know you and know you well. I'm sure you've had loads and loads and loads of measures. But how are you? It's not easy to lose a partner of 50 years, I think you said.
It was, yeah. We were married one day less than 47. 47, one day less than 47 years. I think Bob cast a very big shadow over, a lot of people's like in Victoria, particularly at Southern and particularly all around here, at the Sandbelt courses, and he was quite well known and he loved his golf, and I think he was at his best on the golf course and playing with friends and everything else. You go through different emotions, and it was after getting over the shock.
Because it was a shock, wasn't it?
It was
Bob died
just
suddenly out of
he walked to bed and dropped dead, and that was, he said he felt a bit wobbly, but he had been feeling wobbly for a long time, and all had been investigated, that he was, a bit deaf, and he had that Charcot foot, he had that, very bad foot, and they just said that that's the way it is. You can get wobbly, a little bit of vertigo, and every other man at the golf club that was over 70 had a bit of vertigo. So he really didn't take a lot of notice. He really was not ill. And so the shock, how I feel now is a bit cheated that he went too early. And I can't believe that, as Jackie would say, all that talent, where's it gone? Where's that great game of golf gone? Where's the, the friends have been wonderful and Southern has been wonderful and the tour has been marvellous, the PGA and out, went for a tour around Sandringham.
The Australian Golf Centre.
Yeah.
Did something happen there, Kath, that you'd like?
Well, they made me an honorary member of the PGA.
What would Bob have to say about that, do you think, Kath?
I couldn't repeat what he would say, because he would say, there's so few women that are members of the PGA. It was a men's PGA, and all of them can play golf. And he would say, what the were they thinking?
You couldn't even caddy for 18 hours.
Couldn't even caddy, absolutely. Knew nothing about it. But so that was a great honour, and it has been great. So now, how do I feel? We had a lunch here a few weeks ago. Christy was here as well, and we spoke. Ian Stanley's wife was here, Pam, and Jackie and I, and we all spoke of the demise of our partners. With Jack, with his illness, with Ian, who had so many times been into end-of-life care and come out, and then for Bob, who just stood up, was planning to go and play golf on Monday. And for him it was a blessing.
If I could, by far.
And I've said that, I'd love to die at the end of a sentence, which whether I'm talking rubbish or not.
Mathematically, it's probably the most likely. Some would say
probably, but Is it fair? It's not fair for any of us. Is it too early? Of course it's too early for them to know. How am I doing? Managing. It's gone from... It was never really lousy, and we've all got families and we've got grandchildren, we've got, and for them it's terribly important that my grandson still calls up when I go to Nan and Poppy's house, and we still, you're in Poppy's car and things like that. And we've still got his golf buggy that when my grandson comes, he takes it for a lovely ride around the streets. So is that something to look forward to? Yes. Am I terribly sorry he's not here to see it all? Desperately sorry.
Loss changes as we get older, I think, doesn't it? When you're younger, it seems such an extraordinary thing to happen. But we all know that, the spoiler alert, none of us is getting out alive. And so it's part of life, isn't it? And it doesn't make it okay, but it makes it perhaps easier to deal with in some ways.
I think that I don't question my own mortality, but I do question it. I'm now...
it's a reminder, isn't it?
It's a great reminder, and it's a reminder to get things where you want them to be, sort of, if you can. All of a sudden I'm looking for the title of the house that I haven't yet found. All of a sudden I've been to the solicitor to change the will that should have been done beforehand. All of those marks in life.
Say the things that you want to say to the people you want to say them to.
I've always...
I don't think there's much left unsaid.
There's not much left unsaid but it really does remind you that, there's so much more. If I put a tape measure on it, there was so much more behind than there is in the future. And I remind my boys of that. So that's
it's sad,
it.
but it's part of life.
It's sad, but moving forward in a different way. You allow it in a place where I think it needs to be, or you hope you get there.
And you stay busy too, don't you? I think you still work.
I really do. I still work.
And
I work quite a lot and a few jobs. And actually one of the jobs that I've been doing for a long, long time is I do weddings and funerals, and now I just do the funerals. As a celebrant.
Right. You'd be a fantastic celebrant. I think you really would. I think.
Well, it's 16 years now, but now I concentrate more on the funerals.
Right. Why? Because you feel you've got...
No, because this is the most strange reason. Because with weddings, you're booked up often a year in advance or 6 months in advance, and I don't want that anymore. That's been a real changer for me.
Wow.
I don't want to be booked up next March or next September. I don't want to put that pressure on myself that I have to be there, and also where will I be?
Yeah.
So I'll still do the funerals and have done many, and really...
Wow, I never knew that about you, Kath.
Well, there we go. There we go.
Because the other problem with weddings, Kath, is they're full of young people. Now, it's not their fault, but that still doesn't make it okay, does it?
Absolutely. And it's a young person's game,
exactly
and they always want you to stay. And by the time you've done it, and then they have these sort of, I married Christy on the beach or in the park or in the, in a spaceship somewhere if they can. They all want it so different.
Funerals are sensible. They're
and funerals,
predictable and sensible.
And with the funerals, I feel that you get. I don't actually do any funerals now unless I know them, or have a connection with the family. Yeah. I feel that's the way to go, and I really feel like I'm standing there. And they are much more celebrations. We've become much more sensible with funerals now. As Jack's, as Bob's,
agreed. As
it's not now always in churches and things. So.
Jackie, how are you? Apart from the coughing fit that we've just...
I apologise to everybody.
Don't apologise at all, but April, I think we lost Jack, so it's a little bit fresher than for Kath, but how have you sort of been coping?
To be honest, Jack, I really believe Jack had Alzheimer's 3 years ago. I thought
he changes in.
Yeah. And... I used to speak to my girlfriends and say, "Oh, Jack's doesn't listen, or he says some strange things." And but I realised because Jack's father had Alzheimer's, and his mother had dementia much later, but his father died before he was 70, and I knew there was something wrong. And eventually, I said to Christy and Clint, I said, "We need to to see, I think I should go to the doctor and see what's going on and if there's something we can do. And anyway, they began seeing it when they came up and we came down and things like that. And eventually I took him to our doctor, who's wonderful, and he said, Jackie, you definitely need to go and see. I think he might possibly have Alzheimer's, which I
resist.
No, we went. No, I think he just thought he'd been used to going to doctors and different things a lot because he had
diabetes. That's
diabetes.
Right. That's
yeah,
right.
He had diabetes. But after the accident, Jack got diabetes. His father had diabetes late in life, and they say that accidents can cause that to the body. So he had that. So he was used to going to doctors and different things. Anyway, he went and he didn't get a very kind response, but really, they said, well, if you don't sort of do this and do that, and, he'd already given the smoking away. Eventually, he found it hard because he had smoked all his life. But he said, Jack, you're going to go on medication now, and you've got to give the drink away. Not that he drank constantly. He enjoyed a drink. And I must say he wasn't happy when he walked out, and he said, who does he think he is? And I said, he knows exactly who you are, what you were doing, and you've got to do that. And that's what we've got to do. And anyway, he did, which was amazing. And a few months later, after we had been there, we had our big celebrity tournament, which was, the kids were going, and so was I, were thinking, this is not going to work, because obviously people are drinking there. And, but he was amazing. He really was. And he never had a glass.
Wow.
I used to have a glass of wine, white wine, which, to be honest, some nights I didn't eat it. But he never had another glass, anything.
Wow.
He had already given beer. Yeah, it was amazing. And then soon after that, I said to the kids, because we had a big property in Newcastle, 15 minutes.
Augusta, if I'm not mistaken.
We called it Augusta because it was 7.5 acres of undulating land, and we had horses, and we were there for 37 years, and we bred horses. We had trotters and then race horses as well, and we'd breed them and then race them with people that we knew who were involved as well. And which was great. I mean, I think it was wonderful for Jack. When we moved to the property, it was soon after the accident. Mm-hmm. I had been looking for one, but the ones he was looking at were like 50 acres. And with no way.
Jack.
Yeah, typical Jack. And he was going to drive trotters,
right.
Things like that, and do all that kind of thing. And I found this for 7 acres, and it was amazing. We had a great life there. The kids both had horses, and it was what we always wanted from travelling with them all the time, where they had to always be wearing something nice and smart and, clean and travelling on planes, and they could actually play in the dirt and be normal kids. And that was one of the reasons why we went to live in Newcastle too, although Jack came from Cessnock, so he knew the lake really well.
He's a committed Newcastle.
He was,
Was he not? Yes.
God's
fight for Newcastle.
God's country. God's country. He used to say, yeah. And staunch night supporter of the footy, and so we downsized and moved into somewhere smaller. But in those last 2 years, to be honest, I lost him.
It's an awful,
it is
insidious disease, Alzheimer's.
And he didn't know who I was, and I had to keep reminding him. I had pictures everywhere, the big pictures of the kids and the because we've got 6 beautiful grandchildren, and I just and I kept him at home. Eventually,
that's difficult.
It is very hard. I was the carer and couldn't go
around sleep and wandering around.
Oh yes, and I had to lock all the doors, luckily moving, I only had the garage door, which I dismantled. The side gate I put a padlock on, and the front door I just literally, every time I went out even to the garbage, put the garbage thing, I locked it, because if he came out, he might get an inkling of wanting to have a wander, and he actually did. The week before we moved into the new house, we staying with a friend of ours on the harbour in an apartment there, and I'd had the dogs I put the dogs into the garden where we were moving to, but we had to sort some other things out before we could move in. And I said to Dick, who we were staying with, I said, look, Jack's okay, if you can have him just for this half an hour run over, feed the dogs and come back. When I came back, he was gone. Jack was. Dick was lying down because he's not been well. And we said, where is he? Anyway, he was lost for 5 hours in Newcastle. I nearly had a heart attack. Oh, no. It was 5 o'clock, dark. It's starting to rain. We'd been all up and down the harbour because he's on the harbour. I couldn't find him. I was asking people where, if you see a one-armed man, I need him.
At least he stands out.
Yeah, he did. He did stand out. And I had a niece who was working at a big restaurant there, Custom House on the front. And she said, look, Jackie, I'll tell the security guard here and he'll tell all the others. And then I had a friend, a policeman, and he went to every pub, but they already knew because Georgia had put it out about Jack at them. And he said, you've got to tell the police. You've got to let them know and they can help. Anyway, eventually, of course, I'd said yes, and then I realised what would happen would go viral. So I hadn't told Christy in Melbourne by this time. I'd been so busy looking for him, and lo and behold, these people were all ringing her up. What's happened to your dad? And she didn't know. Anyway, eventually, a friend of ours who owns a cafe in Derby Street in Newcastle called Goldberg's, his boss, his manager was on, heard it through the, obviously went out.
Twitter and all those things.
Saw Jack sitting at a table, said, do you want a coffee, Jack? And kept him there. The police were there, they rang, and I went and I said, Hun, I asked you if you wanted to go for a walk before you disappeared. You've been gone for 5 hours. Where have you been? He had no idea. No idea. Been gone for 5 hours. And he was fine. He was just sitting there like nothing had happened. So when he eventually did pass, he was at home, and he was only in there for 3 or 4 weeks, not even that. 2.5 of the weeks he was in hospital with problems, bowel and thing. And
it's a physical condition all the time. So we only think of the mind. It breaks down the body too.
So this is now breaking down the body, plus the accident actually had caused a lot of problem with his intestine, where he had to have different things done. And lo and behold, it came to bite him in the bum, because he was getting, because of change of diet, and things like that, he was having bowel blockages. We had intestine blockages. We got rid of that after a week in hospital. Then he had a bowel blockage. And the doctor in the hospital said to me, Jackie, every time you bring him, they send him in here, it's not good. It's going to break him down even more. Unless it's really absolutely...
Treatment becomes a part of the problem, doesn't it? It stresses the body further.
Absolutely.
As well, yeah.
So they said, just leave it. Just keep him at the home. So I did. And I'm so grateful that we did do that, because he got pneumonia, and he within a day he was gone. I got Christy up from Melbourne. Clint had just come in from Canberra, so he drove up. My niece and his sister all came, and we were all there with him. It's
a difficult thing to say, but there's a right time, isn't there?
I actually was. I'd bled for him.
It was a relief
for 2 months. It was a relief, and he was relieved.
Yes,
he was just an angry man, and not all the time, but a lot of the time when he couldn't converse. I couldn't understand what he was talking about.
He'd already lost so much in life, hadn't he, Jackie?
Yeah,
from the accident.
exactly.
He'd done an amazing job of building other things.
Yeah.
They're all being taken away.
Yeah.
It would have been
So
awful.
I found it a relief. And yes, the hardest thing was getting over the 2 years of really stressful times with him.
It's tiring for you too.
Which I did. And, everybody kept saying to me, you've got to look after yourself. You've got to look after yourself. And I was.
Are you now?
I am.
I hope so.
Yeah, I am looking after myself. I am doing, we're still running our celebrity tournament in December.
That would be keeping you nice and busy, I would
Which
think,
will be
too.
keeping me busy,
Yes.
yeah. And my son and daughter and their loved ones. And look, I look at my family and I go, I've got 6 beautiful, healthy grandchildren. Both my children are married to beautiful people, and I can't ask for anything more.
People in the world worse off, isn't
Yeah,
there?
and
You don't
Jack
have
would-
to go far to find them.
Jack would want that,
Yeah,
and we'll continue on his legacy. And we went up to they had the international up in Cessnock, the kids the other day, and
Yes, I
we
saw.
went up there, and so it will continue as long as we can.
I think we'll leave it there. 4 incredibly full lives. 2 of you still with us. We'll all miss Jack and Bob, obviously, in the Australian golf community, and that'll always be the case, but it's been fantastic to catch up. Thank you as always, Kath. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
And lovely to meet you finally, Jack. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
So much. So many fabulous memories contained in there, both personal and public. What a contribution Bob and Jack have made to the game, and matched in every way by Jackie and Kathie. Well, that's all for episode 77, but I hope you've made the effort to add the podcast to your follows, because on our next, John Huggan catches up with one of the modern game's great characters.
I mean, in career, you have your 3 rounds, and I'm extremely lucky that one of my 3 rounds happens to be my first round at the Ryder Cup in America, being shout out all day and playing with one of, our biggest European point scorer against arguably one of the 2 best golfers that's ever lived.
That's Nicholas Colsaerts, next time on The Thing About Golf.